Well, folks, it's the first Sunday of a new year, which means that for the past week, you've been hearing the call, new year, new you. Set your goals, make your resolutions, become better, become different, become finally the person you've been meaning to become. Today's the day. I think you know the flood I'm talking about. The ads for gym memberships all over my social media, meal plans, productivity apps, the articles promising that this is the year you finally get organized, finally lose the weight, finally become a morning person. There's an entire industry built on this premise that you are a construction project, that every January you should lay new foundations, frame walls, build yourself into something more disciplined, more productive, more worthy. And then, of course, there's the backlash to all of that. There's just as many think pieces out there now telling us to not make resolutions. Articles explaining that resolutions are doomed to fail, self-improvement culture is toxic, and you should reject the whole enterprise and accept yourself as you are. So now we are caught between two demands. Build a better you, stop trying to build a better you. Even the rebellion against resolution culture has become an exhausting obligation. And I don't know about you, but I find the whole thing pretty exhausting. And not because growth is bad, it's not. And not because change isn't holy, because it is. But because both sides of this argument share the same assumption, that transformation is something you do to yourself. That you're either the construction worker or the one that refuses to pick up the hammer. But there's at least one other option. So this morning, I want to offer a different frame to look at this. Not construction, not refusal, but hospitality. The Christian tradition, as you may know, is saturated with hospitality. Abraham and Sarah welcome 3 strangers who turn out to carry a divine promise. There's a repeated demand in the Hebrew scripture, "You shall not oppress the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." And then in Matthew's gospel, there's the words of Jesus, "I was a stranger and you welcomed me." There's also that strange, beautiful line from the book of Hebrews that reads, "Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares." And we preach this outward, we practice this outward, and I think that's especially important now with our immigrant neighbors at risk. We must recognize that hospitality means welcoming the immigrant, the refugee, the person who doesn't look like us or believe like us. We make room, we open the door, because you never know the holy thing that you're welcoming. This, of course, is an important message. But today, I'd like to talk about something slightly different, welcoming your inner stranger. The stranger who isn't at the door, but is the door. The stranger you're becoming. The self you haven't met yet. The one who keeps knocking quietly, persistently, waiting to be welcomed. I'm going to tell you my story, and some of you know pieces of it. I grew up a Southern Baptist. And when I say Southern Baptist, I mean the whole architecture, the altar calls, the hellfire, the certainty, the dogma. I learned very early how to perform belief, how to say the right words, how to fit the shape the church required. And then I learned something else. I learned that who I am, not what I believed, but who I am, is not welcome. As a queer person, the church made it clear there was no room for me at the table, not unless I could become someone other than myself. And later I would learn that the Southern Baptist Convention was founded explicitly to defend slavery. The rejection was both personal and moral. I hadn't just left. I'd been pushed out of a house that should have never been built. So I did what made sense. I built a wall. I rejected anything related to religion. I mocked those who practiced it. I kept disdain close like armor. If faith had hurt me, I would make sure it would never hurt me again. And for a while that worked. But there was a stranger knocking. I didn't recognize him at first. I didn't want to. He was the part of me that missed something, that felt the absence of spiritual grounding like a phantom limb. He was the part of me that watched people in community and felt hunger. He was the part of me that wondered whether holiness could exist without the violence I taught necessarily came with it. And I kept a stranger outside for years. I was afraid, if I'm honest, afraid of being hurt again, of walking towards a faith and finding the same rejection I experienced waiting for me. And afraid of my secular friends, the ones who also escaped, who might see my return as a weakness, as backsliding, as a betrayal. But the stranger kept knocking. And then, one Sunday, I walked into this church. Almost 10 years ago now. I had low expectations. I was ready to be disappointed, ready to confirm my suspicions that religion was religion, no matter the denomination, and I think I wanted permission to keep that wall up. But then I stepped into Fritchman Auditorium. Channing Hall wasn't available that week. Some of you might remember that sometimes we rented this out during church services, so we had service there, so the service was held there instead. And I don't need to tell you what that room holds. Stephen Fritchman, for whom that sanctuary is named, served this congregation for over 2 decades through some of the darkest years of the 20th century. When McCarthy's committees were blacklisting artists and activists, when people were losing their jobs for their beliefs, and this church opened its doors. Fritchman welcomed the unwelcome. He insisted that conscience could not be legislated, that worth and dignity of every person was not subject to political fashion. That room carries history, the walls remember. And I didn't know any of that yet. It was my first Sunday. But I think my body knew something. I remember seeing the light coming through the stained glass, the vaulted ceilings, the weight of decades of wood and stone. And I noticed I was breathing differently, slower, calmer, like I was home. Rochelle greeted me at the door. Some of you said goodbye to her just yesterday. These flowers we have here today are from her memorial service. She welcomed me with warmth, also a little confusion. She said, "How did you find us?" Mike Sinkoff was there too. I remember. The amazing thing is they weren't trying to convert me. They were just surprised I showed up, I think, and glad. I looked around and I saw political pins on lapels, causes I cared about, positions more progressive than I expected, even from a UU church. I also saw faces that didn't look like each other's. This congregation, I would learn, is one of the most diverse in our denomination. People of different races, different backgrounds, different stories, different languages, somehow all here together. Not in spite of their difference, but alongside them. And later in the service, some of you might remember this, there was a Spanish word of the day. It was a precursor to Oscar's words of intention and inspiration. Such a small gesture, but what was said was enormous. That we want to learn from each other, because everyone belongs here. We don't already have all the answers. The amazing thing was, nobody asked me what I believed. No one needed me to perform anything. They expected nothing of me in terms of faith. And that, paradoxically, is where faith found room to grow. Not faith in doctrine, not faith in certainty, faith in my fellow humans, faith in you. People who wanted to make the world a little bit more kind, a little bit more just. Faith that we could be beloved community together. I drove home that day planning to check out a different church the next week. I wasn't ready to commit. The wall was still up, even if it had some cracks. But something pulled me back here. I knew in my body, before my mind had language for it, that I could bring my whole self to this place. Not the self I'd been, not the self I thought I should become, my whole self, including the stranger I hadn't met yet. Eventually, strangely enough, that stranger led me to divinity school. Eventually, he led me here to this pulpit, standing in this room where I was first welcome. A person who rejected religion, who said to anyone who would listen, "I'm not a religious person," is becoming a minister. Imagine that. So here's what I want to ask you on this first Sunday of the new year. What stranger is knocking for you? Not the person you should become. That's just another construction project. Not the resolution, the self-improvement plan, the optimized version of you that an algorithm is trying to sell you every day. The stranger is different. The stranger is who you're already becoming, quietly, persistently, whether you've opened the door or not. Maybe it's a calling you've been dismissing, something that keeps tugging at you, a vocation, a passion, the way of being in the world that you've told yourself is impractical, unrealistic, not for someone like you. Maybe it's a truth about yourself you've kept hidden, something about who you love or how you pray or what you actually believe when no one is asking you to perform. Maybe it's a relationship you've been afraid to repair, or maybe one you've been afraid to release. Maybe it's the part of you that's tired of being strong, the part that wants to ask for help, the part that wants to weep, to rest, to stop holding it all together. Maybe it's the part of you that wants to create something, to write that poem, to sing the song, to start the project you've been putting off for years, because who are you to make something beautiful? But you have that spark. Maybe it's the part of you that's angry, righteously, wholly angry, and the part that wants to stop being polite about injustice. The stranger keeps knocking. Maybe the stranger's calling right now. Maybe you should pick up. But the stranger is different for each of us, but knocking all the same. So here's my invitation, and I offer it as relief to you, not as a burden. You don't have to build anything this year, okay? You don't have to construct a new self. You don't have to earn your worthiness. You just have to open the door. Be curious about your own becoming. And when you surprise yourself this year, and trust me, you will, greet that surprise as a guest. Be hospitable. Don't interrogate it. Don't demand its credentials. Welcome it. Offer it a seat. See what it might have to say. Because you might be entertaining an angel unawares, and that angel might be you. In a few moments, we're going to sing together for all that is our life. We sing our thanks and praise. I love this song because it's about gratefulness. Not for a gratefulness for a life that could be, not the optimized, resolved, constructed version of our life, but for all that is our life right now, as it is, with all of its cracks and contradictions. That's the hospitality I'm talking about, welcoming what is, welcoming who you are, welcoming who you're becoming. This church welcomed me before I knew who I was becoming. Rochelle opened the door. This community made room. And here I am, years later, still arriving, still meeting strangers in myself, still learning to say, come in. That's what I pray you offer yourself this year. Let me close with this hope and prayer. May we have hospitality towards ourselves, not the false hospitality that asks nothing to change, but the true hospitality that makes room for who we're becoming, even when it frightens us. May we trust that transformation is not construction, that we don't have to build ourselves from scratch, that the work is not to become someone new, but to welcome the one who has been knocking all along. For all that is our life, the mess and the beauty and the doubt and the faith, the stranger and the self, we sing our thanks and praise. Amen.